Welcome to St. Louis Presents.
And Debbie, I don't know what the calendar says, but spring has sprung.
I know you brought flowers.
Remember last year I always brought you stuff out of my garden?
Yes, you're so sweet.
So these are my first daffodils. So I picked them today, and there you go.
Well, you are far ahead of us in Alton because South
In
St.
so
Louis,
many ways.
in South St. Louis, mine are coming up, but they're not that far along. But Alton is very exciting these days. Alton selected for that show, Small Business Revolution.
Right, we beat out other towns from across the nation, and we're going to be featured in their season next year. And I was at the big rally down at the old bakery brewery for the big announcement. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah. Well, I want to give a quick shout out to Dance St. Louis, which I know you're familiar with.
Frequent guests on this program.
And many others. They asked me to MC their annual big fundraiser, which is the Ballet Ball, which just happened. It was a great event at the Palladium, and I just want to thank everybody that came out. It was a lot of fun. Now, I don't know about you, I can't dance.
I cannot dance either.
And I certainly can't run a marathon.
No, but I can strollathon.
There is a strollathon coming up. You know, it's the annual event for the International Rett Syndrome Foundation, and we're going to hear more about that and how you can get involved.
Yes, and we also have, I consider this a public service announcement because a lot of people in St. Louis City are paying a lot more than they need to simply because they forget or neglect to fill out one form. So we'll explain coming up. And
Wow.
also,
that would make you very unhappy paying what you don't.
I know.
And you know, what is, Debbie, you know everything. What's the key to happiness?
Well, there is actually a formula for that, and we're going to talk more about how to be happier.
There's a college professor that has the key to happiness, and he's going to share it with us.
Yes, absolutely. So all that and more coming your way on this edition of St. Louis Presents. Stay with us. Welcome back. RettSyndrome.org, an organization that has funded more than $40 million in research for the neurological disorder, Rett syndrome.
The organization is currently gearing up for its 11th annual St. Louis Strollathon. That's its signature fundraising event.
And Joyce Opinski is the co-chair of the St. Louis Strollathon, and she joins us today. First of all, a strollathon sounds like fun, but we should start at the beginning with Rett syndrome. It may be something that people have heard of, but don't exactly know what it is.
Sure. So Rett syndrome is a relatively rare disorder that most people haven't heard of until it sort of comes into their life. And it is similar in some ways to cerebral palsy or some other neurological disorders. Mostly it affects girls and women. And babies are born and develop normally up to a certain point, and it varies for everyone, but generally around 1, 2, 3 years, the babies either stop developing new skills or start having a period of regression and lose skills that they have, and that's when it's diagnosed. You don't know when the children are first born that they have it. It's usually some time in the early years of life that it's diagnosed, and it leads to a host of complications. Many of the girls and women affected don't walk. About 50% do walk.
Isn't handshaking one of the big things?
No, one of the big things as far as hands go is some sort of repetitive hand use. So a lot of times you see the girls doing something like this, or their hands in their mouth, or some sort of hand motion. They basically have no functional hand use. And one of the biggest challenges is inability to speak. So sometimes the girls will maybe have a few words and then lose that. And so communication is really challenging. And then there's a host of other medical complications that can go with it. Seizures is a very big problem. Some of the girls aren't able to eat and need a feeding tube, and there's a lot of disabilities that go with it.
So for families dealing with Rett syndrome, it, I'm sure, is a very intense thing to have to deal with. You have a daughter with Rett syndrome?
So yeah, my daughter Lily is 18. And she has Rett syndrome. She was diagnosed right around her 2nd birthday. She has never walked. She uses a wheelchair. She cannot speak. She had a few words when she was younger, but she has lost lost the ability to do that. She understands everything, and you can tell she has great communication with her eyes. She'll blink for yes or look away for no. She also has a really cool computer device that she can navigate with her eyes, and she understands everything. It's sort of that she's trapped in a body that just doesn't work.
So it doesn't affect intelligence, it just affects your ability
Communication.
to speak and communicate. So how does that affect your education?
So, it varies depending on, where you live, and if the girls have other health complications, that can affect it. But, my daughter is a senior this year. She'll be graduating May 17th. And she's been, fully included all through high school and goes to our, neighborhood high school. But there's definitely challenges. Most of the girls get special education services, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and those sorts of things.
So when we're raising money for Rett syndrome, is this for research? Is this to help families defray the costs involved? Because if it's a genetic thing, how do you fix it or change it or move forward?
Right. So most of the money goes to rettsyndrome.org and is primarily used for research. There are clinical trials happening now, which was not the case 16 years ago when my daughter was diagnosed. The science has come a long way, and there's different drugs that are in clinical trial stages now that help some of the treatments of some of the symptoms of Rett syndrome. So some of the drugs being tested are treatments. There's other things being talked about, gene therapy and other things that hopefully ultimately will lead to a cure.
Well, the Rett Foundation has a clinic here in St. Louis, right? What happens there?
We do. We're so lucky to have it. So it just opened a couple years ago, and we have two wonderful neurologists at Children's Hospital, Dr. Reither and Dr. Weisenberg. And so when you have an appointment at the Rett syndrome clinic, and people travel from neighboring states to come here because there aren't very many in the country, you meet with the neurologist, you meet with a dietitian, you meet with a physical therapist, occupational therapist, augmentative communication team, and so it's really a holistic approach, and especially for families that may live in a more rural area, to be able to come here and see all those specialists in one day, and most doctors even have not heard of Rett syndrome, or many doctors have not, and so to be able to come to people that's really their focus is wonderful.
So the big fundraiser here in St. Louis is your Strollathon. So if there's something that impacts everyone, something like breast cancer, you can get tens of thousands of people to show up. So what is the appeal for the Strollathon? How do you get people activated and involved?
Sure. So this is our 11th one, and most of the people who attend have some kind of connection to Rett syndrome. A daughter, a granddaughter, a niece. We have a lot of teachers that come, classes, friends, family, and we have about 20 or so families affected by Rett syndrome who come to the stroll every year.
Well, I heard you have a really good turnout, like usually over 500 people, which I would think is a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. So yeah, we have a great turnout, and some people, have teams of, 5 people. Some people have teams of 100 people. And so usually it's some kind of connection. Sometimes we have people come that may have a family member out of town that has Rett syndrome, and they want to do something to, support it and support their family out of town, and so they come to our event.
And so give us some more information about when the Strollathon is. I'm sure we have some information that'll pop up on the screen, but
Sure.
Where and when?
It is Saturday, May 5th, the first Saturday in May. We're at a new location this year, so if you've come before, we moved. We're at the St. Louis JCC in Creve Coeur, the Creve Coeur campus. Registration starts at 9. We start the stroll at 10. There's no registration fee to come, so anyone can come and walk. All donations are obviously, encouraged and appreciated.
Is there any good news to spread as far as research and curing this or treating it?
There's lots of good news. There's lots of good news. I mean, clinical trials are happening, and research is happening, and scientists are engaged, and there was not talk about cures 16 years ago, I'll tell you that. So yeah, we definitely are moving in the right direction, but research is expensive, and we need help in raising the money to get there.
Well, Joyce, thanks for sharing more about Rett syndrome with us. We encourage all of our viewers to attend Saturday, May the 5th. There's the information on the screen. It's strollathon.org/St-Louis.
And tell Lily hello for us.
Yes, absolutely. Joyce Opinski, thanks for being with us today on St. Louis Presents. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, we have more to share about taxes and happiness. Can those two things go together? We'll explore. Maybe. We might have some good news about taxes. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Here's your check. got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. Joining me now are City of St. Louis Assessor Stephen Conway and Personal Property Tax Manager Mary Stevens. And they have some very important information that will help you this tax season. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate it. I know it's a busy time of year for both of you.
Well, it is, and but we had an important message. We've asked people to turn in their personal property declaration by April 1st. It's by state law and state statute that you must turn it in. Otherwise, if you don't, there will be a built-in 10% penalty when you get your tax bill in November of next year.
Now, it sounds like something that we should, for anyone living in the city of St. Louis, they've gotten it in the mail, or we hope they've gotten it. Do we have a slide of what it looks like that we could just pop up right now? Because I know people get it in the mail. Maybe they forget about it. Maybe they put it aside and they think, oh, it's not due until there. That's what it looks like. And it does clearly say on the top that it's due April 1st. But what do you think the reason is, Steve, in that some people are not sending it back in a timely fashion?
Well, and Mary's going to talk a little bit, but if you move, it may come back to us. But the people have it, they put it with their tax files. They're looking there, they don't see the thing about the 10% penalty on the top, but it's pre-printed. If everything's the same, you still have to send it back to us. And it's due April 1st, not April 15th. And 20,000 people don't return it and pay a 10% penalty. And that's not our goal in the assessor's office. We want people just to pay the correct amount and no penalties. And so this is part of our messaging that we're doing to reach out to people, to remind them to send it in, because we don't really want that penalty. And we don't want to have to look for you and spend time and resources to find you, because eventually you're going to pay that tax and the penalty when you renew your plates.
Mary, I imagine maybe some people look at it and they're like, yeah, I still own all those vehicles, and so they just assume they don't have to fill it out then. But then they probably call your office and they're upset because suddenly they have to pay more money than they thought they owed.
Yes, that is correct. The majority of the taxpayers believe when they receive the declaration, if the vehicle that's listed on there is correct, they don't need to do anything. But that's not the case. We send the declaration out so that the taxpayer can inform us as far as whatever vehicle they owned on January 1st of that tax year. And by sending the declaration in on or before April 1st, like Mr. Conway said, they're actually saving themselves a 10% penalty per vehicle. Not just overall, just each asset is 10% additional assessed value added to their bill.
Wow. So that can add up to quite a lot depending on what vehicles you own.
Right.
So I imagine you hear a lot of great excuses.
Well, yes, we do. And like he said, we don't have the authority to waive the penalties. So we get calls basically saying, well, we do understand sometimes people, they're away from home. We have a lot of people that go down to Florida. They're away during this time of year because they're going for warmer weather. And just the fact that, as he said, they confuse our deadline with the federal return deadline, which is April 15th. And ours is actually April 1st. And there's also a problem with taxpayers when they move from the county to the city. They're under the assumption that we receive that information in our office, but we do not. So if they don't contact our office and say, hey, I moved into the city, I need to be added to your tax rolls, we don't know that they're there. So.
Now, 20,000 people, I mean, the city of St. Louis population is not that large. That's a significant portion of taxpayers that are
Well,
missing
it's
this deadline.
20,000 accounts are late. So it could be a husband and wife's account, or if you have the car in your name for your kids. So it really represents more people than just 20,000 people.
All right, so what about when people need a waiver of some kind? Is that a possibility? If I call and I say, hey, I'm not going to be in town for the next 6 months, can I get a waiver? Or or if they're just confused about the system, how does that operate?
Okay, as far as the personal property tax waiver, it's for taxpayers who did not own a vehicle or did not have any tax liability for the prior year. And in order to receive the personal property tax waiver, you would have to come into our office, bring in your ID, a copy of your vehicle title, or a copy of the vehicle application for title, and then we can process a waiver in our office at that time. If you're not in the city, and there's on occasion, special occasions where circumstances arise where you couldn't necessarily come down and get the waiver, we will fax the waiver.
All right, so we said before this segment started that we might have some good news when it comes to taxes. So we're just doing this as a public service to remind people to send that in, because we're actually saving them money and saving you the time and expense of having to chase after them, so that you can actually focus on more important things like upgrading software. You were saying Mary's department is getting some upgraded software.
Well, actually, both Mary's in charge of personal property, all of the business equipment and all of the vehicles in the city of St. Louis. Our system is from 1983. As a matter
1983.
And my first day on the job, I tried to use the mouse. The mouse doesn't work. You have to use the tab key, and those of you who are old enough would know. And so next year, hopefully, we have this in online with Mary's department in November. So next year, we'll mail it out, but you'll be able to respond online. Online.
Well, that'll make it so much easier for people. So make sure you fill that out, ladies and gentlemen, by April the 1st. If you have any questions, there's the information from the Assessor's Office. Stephen Conway and Mary Stevens, thank you so much for joining us here on St. Louis Presents.
Thank you for having us.
Great information, and Steve Potter has some information for us as well. He's got some news headlines.
Thanks, Debbie. And since 2016, the City of St. Louis has been offering residents the chance to take ownership of vacant land through the Land Reutilization Authority's Mow to Own program. Now, to participate, residents must live adjacent to the LRA lot and maintain it, as well as stay current on its property taxes. So far, 174 city residents have taken ownership of LRA lots. So if you're interested in participating in the Mow to Own program, you can learn more by visiting stlouis-mow.gov. You may see bike share in St. Louis in the near future. The city has approved an ordinance allowing bike share companies to operate dockless or station-based systems on public property, and is currently accepting applications. Bikes will likely appear in more active areas first, such as downtown, Forest Park, the Central West End, and Tower Grove Park. The city hopes to have bike share active by late spring, and you can learn more about bike share at stlbikeshare.org. Forest Relief of Missouri is currently accepting applications for Project Communitree. The program provides free 3-gallon container trees to community groups for planting projects. The trees are grown at Communitree Gardens Nursery in Creve Coeur Park from over 50 species of seedlings provided by the Missouri Department of Conservation. Now, since 1993, over 100,000 trees have been planted, and you can learn more about the program by visiting moreleaf.org. Black Panther made its much-anticipated release in February, and it shows no signs of slowing down. In less than a month, it has not only crossed the billion-dollar mark at the box office, but it has also become the first film in the entire history of the Marvel Universe to own a box office for an entire month. The Demetrius Johnson Charitable Foundation recently treated area youth to a private screening of the mega hit, and our cameras were there, so take a look at this.
Opportunity to be with the kids in our city and our community. This is a great idea, and it's going to be a great and tremendous event for these children to experience, coming to see the #1 movie in the world now. The #1 movie in the world and to see actors that look like them on the screen that are outstanding performers, experts at their craft and their art, and then that gives them a sense of self-pride that they need, that all of us need, to see people in all races and all ethnicities, to see people that we can identify with in important roles and in historical roles. And you know, everybody knows the plight of our children today. And some of the communities that are the most violent communities, not just in the United States, but in the world, comparable by numbers all over the world. They need positive entities and positive events in their lives like this to help mold that character that will make them successful in life. This is educational, this is just inspirational, and I am so proud to be a part and so honored that Demetrius Johnson and the Demetrius Johnson Foundation divided me to be be a part of this. I'm very proud of it.
It just shows that if you work hard, make good decisions, do the right thing, being black, you still have an opportunity to be successful. The experience of these kids are going to have today, they're going to take it for a lifetime, and that's what it's all about.
I want you to say that I am somebody. I am intelligent, smart, and beautiful. Enjoy it.
You can watch all of the highlights from the screening right here on STL TV or by visiting our YouTube page. And Debbie, I haven't seen it. I've heard a lot of good things about that movie, but you saw it, right?
I saw it, and I'm not a big fan of superhero movies in general. This one was amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. So.
I gotta see it, gotta see it.
Yeah, you definitely do. Well, the majority of young adults list happiness as their #1 priority in life.
But, and that's a big but, in today's world of social media and constant connection, is true happiness really attainable?
Well, our next guest tackles that very question in his new book, When Likes Aren't Enough. Please welcome Dr. Tim Bono. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, your new book is out, and it really delves into not just social media and happiness, but positive psychology, which you teach a class at Washington University in positive psychology, which in a nutshell is what?
Well, the field of psychology historically placed a lot of attention on what goes wrong with the person and how we can treat disorders like depression and schizophrenia and anxiety. And as important as that work is, more recently there's been a move to also understand the good life by understanding happiness and joy and other positive emotions. And so the field of positive psychology has taken the scientific method to the age-old question, how can we increase happiness in our own lives? So I've been teaching a class at WashU over the last couple of years that delves into that research from behavioral scientists on how we can build positivity in our own lives. And the book essentially takes all of those studies and puts it into book form, and I include some narratives from my own students on how they've taken that research and incorporated it into their own lives.
I want to ask you about the title of your book, When Likes Aren't Enough, and you're talking about like when people like you on Facebook.
Yes,
and all that other stuff.
The external validation on Facebook.
So is it true, are you confirming my long-held belief that social media is the end of the world?
Well, I'm not sure I'd go so far as to say it's the end of the world. I think that social media is like a lot of other things. I don't think that it's inherently good or bad, but the way that we use it can be used in ways that are good or bad. So to the extent that you're on Facebook or Instagram to catch up with people so that it becomes a means toward an end of actually maintaining an authentic connection with another person, social media can be a wonderful thing. But we know that a lot of people are using it as a means of social comparison. And psychologists have known for a long time that social comparison is one of the fundamental barriers to a sense of happiness. If we constantly have our head over our shoulder saying, how do we measure up to other people? How do the trips that they're going on measure up to the kinds of experiences that we're having? That's placing our happiness in an external variable. And so it's really difficult to have a sense of autonomy in our own lives if we are constantly worried or feeling envious about what others have compared to what we have.
Right? Or going through life thinking, how can I turn this experience into something to post on Instagram so that I can get a lot of people to like it? So instead of experiencing things, your whole goal is for people to like you on whatever function.
It's true, and a lot of people are using social media in exactly that way. They're modifying their actual experiences based on how they can gain notoriety in a sort of contrived way to get a lot of Instagram likes or to get people to feel envious about their experiences so that they're making decisions about how they're going to spend their time or what they're going to do, not because they're actually enjoying the experience, but just in the interest of getting pictures that are Instagram worthy, that other people will admire. It's amazing how much of our time goes to trying to impress people we don't even know or don't even like, but nonetheless we kind of get a high off of that, but unfortunately that little high from a bunch of likes the research says it's not sustainable for actual long-term happiness.
For sure. I know you make a couple of points in your book, and one is, you'll have to explain this to me, if I got it right, sitting is the new smoking?
Yes, this is something that physicians have been looking at for the last couple of years. The idea that one of the important behaviors that contributes to our overall sense of happiness is physical activity. So people who incorporate exercise into their lives on a regular basis are happier because that releases the brain's natural feel-good chemicals. And on the flip side, if we have a lifestyle that is sedentary by nature, so people who have desk jobs where they're just sitting from 8:30 to 5 and not getting a bunch of activity, that can lead to costs.
Or if you're keeping up with Debbie on Facebook all
day. Right, yeah, so, well, and that's,
yeah.
You know, as wonderful as technology is, now we can do almost everything from the comfort of our screens. So we don't have to get up and do anything,
right.
And that is taking a toll not only physically, but also on a psychological level.
What about this mindset that so many of us have where we're going through the drudgery of our daily life and we think, you know, when I get another job, I'll be happy. When I make more money, I'll be happy. When I lose that 25 pounds, then I'll be happy.
Yes, a lot of us live with the expectation that happiness is this destination over there somewhere. And as soon as we achieve all those things, we have our physique as we want it, we have our job, our money, our relationship status in a particular way, then we'll be happy. And I think a much more useful approach toward the pursuit of happiness is to acknowledge that happiness itself resides on a continuum, so that instead of asking, how can I be happy, as if it's a destination, a better approach, I think, is to say, how can I be happier? What are the small daily behaviors I can be incorporating into my life so that a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, I can be happier than I am today? And I think that approach kind of takes the pressure off a little bit, that it's not that we have to have all these particular characteristics in a certain way to be happy. Instead, it's, well, maybe there are some things that are going to prevent me from getting there, but what are the small things I realistically can be doing to become just a little bit happier? And then over time, that can accumulate.
And what are those small steps? Aren't you curious now?
Yes, you have
Sure.
a pen, I want to write these down.
Or, you know, I can recommend a book where a lot of them are outlined, but I would say that perhaps the easiest behavior that we can incorporate is the daily practice of gratitude. A lot of studies have shown that people who spend just a couple of minutes a week just reflecting on the good things in their lives show a significant improvement in how they feel about their lives. Their optimism increases. They have higher expectations that things are going to work out in their favor. People who practice gratitude also get sick less often. There's a strong connection between our psychological health and physical health. So just that simple practice, it's with all of the stressors and negative things in the world, the practice of gratitude redirects the focus of our attention to some of those good things, and it can go a long way for our happiness.
It sounds a lot like common sense, really, everything that you're saying, but I'm wondering, how about students, college students, so young people in their 20s are in your class, are they receptive to this?
They are, and I think that that's illustrated by the fact that the class I teach is not a required course. It's not a requirement for anybody, and yet it tends to have among the largest enrollments of any classes at the university, and I think it's because young adults understand that there are a lot of barriers that are placing limits on their happiness, and they're seeking out, they have an interest in what these behaviors and strategies are.
I got to read that book.
Yeah, before we let you go, though, there is an equation for happiness, and what is that equation?
We can conceptualize happiness as the quotient of what we have divided by what we want. And that's why the practice of gratitude is so important. It's shining a spotlight on that numerator, emphasizing what we do have, and keeping our expectations realistic to minimize that denominator.
WhenLikesAren'tEnough.com is the place to go. Dr. Tim Bono is a professor at Washington University. Thanks so much for joining us and telling us more about how we can be happier, and thanks for this book.
And you made me very happy.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for having me.
And I'm happy people watched us today.
Me too. That's a great place to end this show on a happy note. We hope you enjoyed this episode of St. Louis Presents.
So please come back and join us next time.
All right.
See you.
I'm happy.
Me too. Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to stay that way.